To New World Next Week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I'm James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. Stealing your stuff is now called equitable sharing. We've got that story plus surveillance censorship. But first, a story that I think is very new as of this day. It's March 30th, as I come to you here from Portland, Oregon. Leaked emails show companies' bribery for oil contracts by Samsung, Rolls-Royce, and Halliburton. In a list of the world's great companies, Unaoil is nowhere to be seen. But for the best part of the last 2 decades, the family business from Monaco has systematically corrupted the global oil industry, distributing many millions of dollars worth of bribes on behalf of corporate behemoths, including Samsung, Rolls-Royce, Halliburton, and an Australian company, Leighton Holdings. Now, a vast cache of leaked emails and documents has confirmed what many suspected about the oil industry and has laid bare the activities of the world's super bag man as it's bought off officials and rigged contracts around the world. A massive leak of confidential documents has for the first time exposed the true extent of this corruption, implicating dozens of leading companies, bureaucrats, politicians in a sophisticated global web of bribery and graft. After a 6-month investigation across 2 continents, Fairfax Media, essentially the Sydney Morning Herald, worked together with the Huffington Post, and they're revealing today with the documents and the PDFs and all the stuff that billions of dollars of government contracts were awarded as the direct result of bribes paid on behalf of firms including British icon Rolls-Royce, U.S. giant Halliburton, Australia's Leighton Holdings, and Korean heavyweights Samsung and Hyundai. The investigation centers on a Monaco company called Unaoil, run by the jet-setting Asani clan. Following a coded ad in a French newspaper, a series of clandestine meetings and midnight phone calls led the reporters to obtaining hundreds of thousands of the Asani's leaked emails and documents. Now, James, as I mentioned, there are the PDFs and all of the stuff in these reports from the Sydney Morning Herald, and interesting client lists of bits about corruption in places like Libya, Syria, Yemen, places maybe we've heard a little bit about in the news. So is this business as usual, James?
Yes, I mean, this is the oil business when you really look at it. And that's something that came through clearly when I was doing the research for the big oil documentary, was that in the middle part of the 20th century, by the middle part of the 20th century, the oil producer nations had stopped giving away all these, giant concessions to BPs and the like, and were definitely using their leverage to become the sort of bribed brides of these various companies. So the people in positions of power in these various countries have always, for the last half century anyways, definitely used those positions to sell their nation's oil supplies to the highest bidders, and that's the way the oil industry works. So this isn't surprising. It is good to see the some actual documentation coming out of some of the companies that are involved. And when you read through this report, it really does seem to touch on companies from every corner of the globe, not just the U.S., but Canada, Australia, and Italy, France, the U.K., Rolls-Royce, companies like this. I mean, it's certainly every nook and cranny of the major corporatocracy. So again, not particularly surprising. I think the interesting part of this report that leapt out for me, at least on first read, was that, as you mentioned, Libya, Syria, Yemen, it seems like the countries that are implicated in this scandal, as the oil producer nations, seems to be a who's who of the target list of the State Department. And I guess there are 2 ways to look at that. Either one, that's because this is a selective leak designed to give a black eye to some of the State Department's enemies, or 2, it's because the State Department's target list is all of these oil producer nations. I mean, that's who they have on their chopping block, because they want to take out the governments and put in friendly powers, which is why Syria's Assad government is implicated in this as well. So, I don't know. It's an interesting report. I hope people read through it. I'm sure, as they say in this article, there's more reports to come from this reporting. So it'll be interesting to see what else they dig up.
Well, and as you say, maybe it's a controlled leak, because I wonder if it's coming out from places like the Huffington Post. Those are no small DIY, kind of muckraking operations by any stretch. Hey, we'll include the link to Rise of the Oligarchs, your oil documentary, in the show notes, just like we include all the things we say in these episodes down in the show notes, so you can get everything, you can get the links, you can get the PDFs, and you can continue the research for yourself. Our second story this week, the so-called Justice Department resumes its controversial asset forfeiture, but now it's with a different euphemism called equitable sharing. The Justice Department is lifting its suspension on the civil asset forfeiture aka Equitable Sharing Program, which allows cops, local and state, forces to reap a portion of the profits from seizing property from citizens, regardless of their conviction. The controversial practice allows police to seize and keep cash and property from people who have never been convicted and in many cases never charged with wrongdoing under federal rather than state law. Under the federal law, police departments can keep up to 80% of the assets they seize. The DOJ suspended payments to law enforcement under the program back in December 2015 due to budget cuts included in last year's spending bill. Now, the FBI argues asset forfeiture helps law enforcement reduce the incentive for illegal conduct and takes the profit out of crime by helping to eliminate the ability of the offender to command resources necessary to continue illegal activities. Now, everything they say, you should imagine that they are in reality describing themselves, but continuing. The Comprehensive Crime Control Act in 1984 established the Department of Justice Assets Forfeiture Fund to receive the proceeds of forfeiture to pay the costs associated with forfeitures, including managing and disposing of property, plus finance certain general investigative expenses. But the number of times the method has been used has exploded in recent years and become controversial. The Washington Post reported federal authorities seized over $5 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars in assets in 2014 alone, more than the amount of money lost in every single burglary that year. That prompted the view that the police are maybe motivated more by profit and less by justice. The decision by the DOJ to suspend the program in December had critics thinking it was trying to curtail the practice, but appears to be about budget bottom lines. Quote, this really was about funding, not a genuine concern about the abuses rampant in the equitable sharing system, end quote, said Scott Bullock, president of the Institute of Justice, and again from the Washington Post. James, we've heard a long time about the sort of asset forfeiture program and how it's basically when the cops kick down your door, they take everything, your computers, your books, all your stuff, because you might be involved in a drug case. Who cares if maybe they got the wrong house or any number of things and you're never charged and you're left waiting, hey, where are my computers? Where are my stuff? Where are my family rings? And all those sorts of things. And of course, like many of these things, they target the poor. James?
Of course, yes. I mean, it is out and out theft. That is what this is, and they are incentivizing that theft by putting this program in place. It gives an incentive to police and corrupt police officials. Oh, is there such a thing? Yes, there is, and it gives them an incentive to lie about things. There's a story, in that story that you link, that is linked in the show notes, there's a story about a guy that went to an airport with $11,000. Stupid thing to do, but anyway, they said they smelt marijuana on him, so they took the money. That's the kind of thing they can do. They can just say I smell marijuana. They didn't find any marijuana. There was no marijuana on him, but they took the money anyway. Or it could be one of those things, they pull you over in traffic and get you out of the car and go through your car and, oh, look, we found this bag of cocaine in the back seat. We're taking the car. This kind of thing happens. It's been documented time and time again. As you say, $5 billion seized in 2014, and that's equal to more than all of the burglaries that took place in all of the United States. It is theft going on at an industrial level, and it is being incentivized by this program. And guess what, guys? It's back. So yay! This is what you're paying the police services to do, is to steal from you.
Well, and it was gone for a whole 3 months, and that's even if it really ever stopped. Again, they kind of point out, it was like, this may just really be a clerical thing that we've all now seen. Like, oh, the line item wasn't there, and now it's there again. Right. Actually, no, they only stopped giving money back to the individual local police departments. The federal government was still collecting the money. Yeah. and honestly, and I think what you're talking about, like getting pulled over, I think if I said it happens to the poor, I think probably also just as much it happens to people that driving while black or any other situation that's off the charts theft, as you call it, James. So we're on the internet right now talking about all of these things, James, and you and I have been doing this for quite a while. But there's an interesting new study published in Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly, and you tweeted this story. Mass surveillance silences minority opinion. A new study shows that knowledge of government surveillance causes people to self-censor their dissenting opinions online. The research offers a sobering look at the oft-touted democratizing effect of social media and internet access that bolsters minority opinion. So this study, again published in Journalism and Mass Communication Quarterly, studied the effects of subtle reminders of mass surveillance on its subjects. The majority of participants reacted by suppressing opinions that they perceived to be in the minority. This research illustrates the silencing effect of participants' dissenting opinions in the wake of widespread knowledge of government surveillance, as revealed by whistleblower Edward Snowdon in 2013 and many other whistleblowers who don't get the massive attention. See other previous episodes of New World Next Week for more on that. James, they call this the spiral of silence, and it's a well-researched phenomenon in which people suppress unpopular opinions to fit in and avoid social isolation. It's been looked at in the context of social media and the echo chamber effect, in which we tailor our opinions to fit the online activity of our friend face or jitter friends or Twitter or Facebook or any number of things. The study adds a new layer by explicitly examining how government surveillance affects self-censorship. And again, we'll include the links which get into the actual methodology and how many people and all for that. Suffice it to say, Elizabeth Stoichev, lead researcher in the study and assistant professor at Wayne State University, is disturbed by her findings. Quote, "So many people I've talked with say they don't care about online surveillance because they don't break any laws and don't have anything to hide. And I find these rationales deeply disturbing," she said. She also said participants who shared the nothing to hide belief, those who tended to support mass surveillance as necessary for national security, were the most likely to silence their minority opinions. James, don't censor yourself. Thoughts?
I appreciate that the government cares about us and looks after us by spying, listening to what we do. And I wholeheartedly support the government in its endeavors to keep us safe from the scary bearded Muslim boogeymen. I give my allegiance to Big Brother and will report dutifully on anyone who does not. Thank you for your time.
I, for one, welcome our new ant overlords, right?
Yeah, no, this is, I mean, obviously this is exactly what we've been saying for years now. Since the Snowdon revelations, quote unquote, came out and all of that, I mean, we've been saying it is the panopticon. They want you to know that they are spying on you so that you will censor yourself. The only answer is not censor yourself. And I know that's putting yourself out there. Oh no, you might be the nail that sticks up and gets hammered down. But it really, literally, if we do not use our free speech and not engage in the self-censorship, if we succumb to it, then they win. That is the end game, to get you to censor yourself. So this isn't surprising, but it is perhaps a wake-up call to the people out there that you might know in your life who are censoring themselves. So please do share this information with them.
And especially with people who have given you that argument before. I bet we all have somebody in our life, probably close to us, that have said, well, I don't have anything to hide. Well, what should you worry about? And show them the research that says actually you're the one changing and censoring yourself.
Right. And on that note, I should throw in a link to Dan Dix had an excellent video on that. If you have nothing to hide, why would you care? And he was going around asking people for the bank account information and stuff. Well, you don't have anything to hide. Why do you care? It was a really good video. I'll throw the link in the show notes.
So, James, as we wrap up this 263rd episode of New World Next Week, I'll make a couple of Good News Next Week notes. You know, I'm making a weekly episode of Good News Next Week, and the latest episode is called Throw Away Your Trash Can, and it is about minimizing the garbage you take into your life so you don't have to worry all that much about where that garbage goes afterwards. Meanwhile, our buddy Brock West tweeted a good news story. State attorney generals pledged to crack down on companies that deceived the public on climate change. And James, you at Corbett Report noted how a viral meme taught the internet that taxation is theft. Perhaps that goes back to the asset forfeiture, what we're talking about. So any words on that, James, before we blast through the last bit of headlines?
No, I think that's good for now.
That's good. All right. I'll go through the headlines submitted by you out there using hashtag New World Next Week. As we reported for you very recently, exactly as we told you it would basically play out, FBI drops iPhone case against Apple after outside hack succeeds. Meanwhile, Google is warning Gmail users of government-backed hackers. CIA-armed militias are shooting at Pentagon-armed militias in Syria. And U.S. kills ISIS second in command for the third time, in 2 years. But for the first time ever, something we've been talking about from the very beginning of New World Next Week, drones have now delivered a package to a residential area for the first time ever. And James, all our misleaders and the powers that shouldn't be are heading to the District of Criminals for a little nuclear summit. And we note that the UN's atomic chief was warning recently about nuclear terrorism, which, as you noted on Twitter, James, can only really ever be false flag terrorism. So we are shutting down the month of March, and we're getting ready to enter the always action-packed month of April. So we'll implore you to keep everybody up to date and submit those news stories using hashtag New World Next Week. A deprogramming note, James, I'm going to be on the upcoming episode of the CIA in Hollywood with Tom Secker and Pierce Redmond. We had a fantastic conversation. And I also do a live